Welcome back to the swamp, my friends. I hope you all enjoyed your weekend. Let's start this week off with some good old-fashioned Skinwalker and Wendigo scares. Today, these viewers sent in what they claim to be Skinwalker and Wendigo stories. Now, at the end of the day, it is up to you whether or not you believe any of them. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, whether it be a Skinwalker or Wendigo story or something else, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this channel going. Now, without further ado, let's get into these creepy stories with creatures that'll keep you up tonight. When I was about 10, I started going to a camp called YMCA Camp St. Croix. It's located on the St. Croix River in Wisconsin. This camp has had a few good stories, but I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. As I just found this channel and remembered these things, I wanted to share what I could remember. Back when the camp was first being used, a Native American tribe leader / chief, I'm sorry, I don't really know the definitions, came to a camp and told the owners and counselors that this wasn't their land and that they shouldn't be making a camp on it. They ignored him. Fast forward to when I started going there. There were a few old stories passed down about old counselors and stuff from years before. Even a really scary one that doesn't really have anything to do with skinwalkers. I might share it later. Anyway, one of the stories is of the Slender Man or Shadow Man, because Slender was really popular around this time. They said they were long, skinny black figures in the woods that screeched or something. One day, a group of 5 to 7 kids and a well-known counselor went out to the woods and came back scared pretty bad. These kids all said the reasonably same thing. They said there were some black figures in the trees of the woods. They were there, pretty close to them, and suddenly they noticed a large man shape. One flew over their heads, and the ground shook like it was an airplane. Nobody really believed them, including myself at first. But I happened to be really good friends with the counselor who was with them, because I had been going to this camp for a long time. He told me the same thing as the kids did, but with a little more detail, such as the thing flying above being man-shaped. He began to tell me that he saw these grotesque people and shadows in the woods sometimes. I asked him more about the people, not the shadows, and he explained that he would see them out of the corner of his eyes for only a split second. I remembered hearing about skinwalkers and told him about them. When we went to bed, we all brushed them off. A few days later, my group and some voyagers went on a canoe trip to a campsite where we would stay for 2 nights. On the second night, me and 2 other kids were on our way to the outhouse, which was on a gravel path, when I saw it. Him? I only really think of it as a man, not the man or cryptid, just man. We all stopped and stared, and it stared back. It was so obviously not a human that it left a sinking feeling in my stomach. I don't think I've ever felt so scared. Then, just as fast as it was there, it was gone. Maybe it was a deer standing on its hind legs in the dark or just another camper. But when I think about it, it's just kind of a missing space in my memory, or a cutout where man should be. We didn't sleep that night, but one of the kids that were with me needed to use the bathroom, so he just kept walking towards the outhouse and went. When I got back from camp, I got very scared whenever I thought about skinwalkers, because I thought if I thought about them, then maybe they would come and try to get me or something. The more I thought about it, the thing that I saw seems more to be like the shadow people and the older counselors and kids talked about. When I think about that moment now, I don't feel scared, but instead this peace or serenity, because for some reason, I don't think whatever it was wanted to harm us or scare us. That's why I think it may be a ghost or some sort of ancestor that got left behind. I think what I saw could be a Skinwalker, but it could be something else. I have a sense that it could be something along those lines, I don't know. I thought the best place to share this would be here on this show, since you share so many odd stories like this. You seem to know a lot about Native American beliefs, and may be able to help me figure out what I saw. You might be able to at least find a connection between the tribe leader and chief and the shadow people, and this creature of sorts. Thank you for sharing my story. Before we start, I will preface this with the following. I have always been interested in cryptids, occultism, the paranormal, and all that. But until about 2 years ago, I was skeptical about it. About 2 years ago, I started to really look into this stuff with a friend called Z. They had a lot of luck with that kind of stuff. I have experienced a lot since then, including the story that I'm going to share with you. I have continued to delve into the unknown. One final note. I'm not ingrained in the culture much anymore, but I am about 1/3 to 1/4 native, though not Navajo. Now, about a year ago, I and my friends had decided to go camping up in northern Arizona near Flagstaff. We chose this spot because we all wanted to escape the hell that is the rest of Arizona's weather. Originally, the plan involved more people, but by the time we actually left, we were down to me, my friend Z, V, and P. This worked out though, as it meant we could just take one car, something that may have saved us that weekend. Now, we are by no means experienced campers or anything, but we had the basics. A tent, flashlights, fire starters, and I had my Mosin Nagant. Not the best, I know, but a big round that I could fire fairly simple. I had ample ammo at the time as well. We chose a site based on reviews a bit north of Flagstaff, and followed our GPS there through some windy back roads. Eventually we hit a Y intersection, and went left as the GPS told us to go. By the time we eventually find a parking area and get out looking for a good campsite, it's well past 10 p.m. So I take my rifle and flashlight as it's so dark. Z and V also grab flashlights and we head off. We trekked through the woods for about 15 minutes, looking for a good place, but to no avail. We were all feeling tense as we searched. Something felt off, and we all vocalized it, almost like we were being watched. We start to head back through a clearing we passed to the car, but about 3/4 of the way through, I ask Z a question and get no response. Finding this particularly odd, I turn around to find him about halfway back in the field watching behind us, shuffling in place like he wanted to walk back from where he just came from. I called out to him, and he snaps out of it and swears he only looked back for a second and catches back up with us. Now, before you say that it tried to get him with some sort of mind power, I doubt this because of what happens later, and that he has acted completely normal and looked normal ever since. We get back to the car without anything else happening, and decided maybe we should have taken the right path at the Y instead, so we drive back. We arrived at the Y, and take the right path this time, but get a whopping 30 feet before we stop. There's a ditch in the road, and we aren't sure if the car can make it over, so Z gets out to check. It takes him less than a minute to figure out that it couldn't, and walks up to the driver's side window to tell us. It's only after saying the car can't that he freezes in his tracks and starts to stare behind the car. He simply says, "Look," in a hurried voice. We all contort ourselves around the car, looking through the mirrors in the back window, but we all see it. A tall figure, easily 8 to 9 feet tall, standing beside a tree, watching us. Once confirmed, Z isn't just seeing things, he basically vaults over the car and dives into the back seat, slamming the door behind. During the commotion, we lose sight of the thing for a moment, and by the time we look back, it's still there, but in a different stance, just stalking us. We quickly get a flashlight out of the sunroof while I rapidly load my rifle. During this time, it moves again, slightly deeper into the tree line. But it's still watching us. We are stuck in a staring match for what feels like forever, as we are too concerned backing up will make it strike, and currently it isn't for whatever reason. Eventually something broke our line of sight with it. I can't quite recall what. I believe I was trying to get people to move so I can line up a shot through the back window, but I can't be sure. And knowing what I do know now, it probably wouldn't have done much of anything. Regardless, in this time frame, we lost it as it presumably fell more into the woods. We wasted no time slamming it into reverse, turning back to where we originally came from and gunning it. I kept my window down with the barrel out facing the woods it went into. And while I never fired, I swear I saw something dart around in the darkness. I am sure that it chased us because of that, and from the scream we all heard while driving away, it sounded feminine, but not quite human. And the way it was just so loud, so piercing. The way it sounded was just so unnatural. It couldn't be anything good. It had to be evil. We decided to stay in a motel that night in Flagstaff and went back to Phoenix the following morning. That's how the story ended until earlier this year. For those of you who live in Arizona, you probably heard last winter Flagstaff got hit pretty hard with a big snowstorm. Naturally, I went up right after the snowstorm ended to have some fun with friends in the cold, sled, that kind of stuff. I hate the never-ending heat the rest of Arizona has to offer. So Flagstaff is my getaway whenever I want to do cool stuff to cool off, and it's easier now because I have some friends who live up there and go to NAU. We'll call them L and W. I went up with 2 other friends, R and Q. Most of the trip was fun, and I did experience some stuff, though mostly unrelated to this. The second to the last though, we decided to go sledding on a particularly good hill, for it was near the sports center, around the arena and stadium both. It sounds too grand, but it's like where you play football or something. I don't know, I'm not really into sports. The sledding was fun and all, but after me and L, who, like Z, was also very cold and ready to go inside, we felt off. Meanwhile, L told me once we were in the car he did see something pop its head over a hill and stare at him before retreating back away. He said he couldn't see all of it, but it seemed like it was big from the silhouette he could see. This one I'm not so sure of, as I couldn't see it myself, but it definitely felt similar to a year ago. So take the second one with a grain of salt, I suppose. Do you guys think both one or neither were skinwalkers? Because I still can't explain the first night, no matter how hard I think about it. Thank you for sharing my story. Before I start, I need to give you a bit of background about myself. I'm not willing to give out my name, or the county here, but I live in Colorado. I'm posting this simply because I'm not absolutely sure what is happening. This happened when I was 6, but now I am at least 5 years older. Our family was taking a trip up the mountains, specifically in a cabin owned by my aunt. Near this cabin was a discontinued railroad project, which even tunneled through a mountain. When this happened, it was the near end of the winter months. The result was me spending much more time researching cryptids. Alright, now to the actual story. The entire day had felt off to me. We went on a hike and I couldn't hear any birds or animals, and when we were turning around, I started getting excited because I smelled something coppery and thought it might be copper. And the only thing that deterred me is that it felt like something was watching me. I also had this feeling in the pit of my stomach that if I went to go find it, I probably just wouldn't come back. For me, it was like a sixth sense. I just felt it. I don't know what I would do if I didn't feel that. I didn't think it was blood or anything related, but I felt it wasn't safe to chase the smell. This hike was to the eastern entrance of the discontinued railroad tunnel. Then, back to the cabin. My parents wouldn't let me go in the tunnel whatsoever. As in, the second I stepped within 10 feet, they were getting uneasy and were telling me to get away from there, that rocks might fall. They weren't looking at me. They were staring at a pile of rocks taller than the others, illuminated by the light from the other side. The walk back was tense and quiet. I was the only one trying to initiate conversation. As we were leaving the edge, is when I smelled the copper. As we walked back, my dad kept glancing behind us at random intervals. It was only that night that I actually noticed anything while I was there. There was one bedroom, perfect for a family of 4, but it had only one window. I never trusted that window, and I was right not to. That night, my parents were up much longer than usual, but stayed silent. After they fell asleep, I was pondering on their weird behavior, and at what I would guess was close to 2 a.m. or so, I felt something off. The room cooled down, and I felt horribly cold for a moment. I felt pure dread, and along with the chill, I could almost feel what seemed like hunger of some sort, burning my face at an angle from the window. Whatever it was, it knew I was awake, and it knew that I could tell it was there. Then I felt it. That same feeling of if I don't do this, I won't get a chance to correct that mistake. So I got up as high as I could and jumped off the top bunk where I was supposed to be sleeping. Then I turned on a lamp and pointed it at the window. While it was in my hands, whatever it was, we had a mutual feeling of, no, I don't like this one. It was pale in the light, and my fear probably made me the same color. All that I could see in the window was a nearly white head with pits for eyes, no lips, slightly larger and sharper than normal blood-stained teeth, as well as a thin yet broad shoulders and a single blood-red hand with abnormally long fingers that ended in needle-like points which were hovering, poised to shatter the window. A few seconds after the light hit it, it opened its mouth and let out a muffled scream, blocked slightly by the window, then vanished to the right. The scream woke everyone up, and I was still standing in the dark, pointing a lamp at the window, looking absolutely horrified. My parents finally got me to sleep. I don't really remember how they managed to do that, but the next day while we were heading out, I looked out that window from outside and realized something even more horrifying. This thing had to be at least 8 feet tall, just to have been able to look at the bottom of the window, because there was a ditch around the edge of the cabin. We took one last hike at around 9 a.m. When we looked back in that tunnel, the rocks in the tallest pile had shifted. There was now a deer antler sticking out near the top, and there were no pools of shiny liquid in the cave. The scent of copper was prominent in the area, and now even the fish in the nearby stream wouldn't surface for air or insects. I would like to some sort of reassurance on what I saw, but I'm not sure. Next winter, me and 3 friends are going back to that cabin to go, I guess you could say, hunting. This is a story from Africa, and most likely the only Skinwalker story from Africa. My uncle, cousin, and I try to go to mana pools often as we can, as we don't like the generic game parks, such as the Kruger National Park in South Africa. All the tourists go there, and it's always packed. Plastic and fake with all the fences, it makes us feel caged. Now, we all have been going into the bush for years, and have most likely been out there for months or years without giving it much thought. Just too bad we have lives and work. The bush is our home away from home. Manipul's Zimbabwe, though, is special in its own. You have lions and elephants walking through your camp. There are cabins as well, but we like the campsites. This one time, we had a Nile crocodile take a zebra not more than 20 meters from our campsite. Yes, it's the real Africa, and not Africa you're shown in your local travel guides. So, this happened when we took our friends from the States to show them the real bush. I, as always, took my hammock and my .375 rifle and Colt 1911 handgun. I still need to protect myself from the hippos and stuff. Once we got there to the campsite and we had to set up, I went for a walk looking for Abbey tracks for our friends from across the Great Lake. Nothing bad. A few lions, a cheetah, a zebra, and an elephant had come across where we set up camp. Okay, cool, I thought. They're going to have the fright of their life tonight. I kept on walking around when I saw these strange tracks in the soft sand. Maybe about 30 centimeters long by 15 wide. Looking almost human, but with cat-like imprints. My uncle came from behind me and asked if I had found anything. I showed him the prints, asking if he'd ever seen anything like this. He shrugged it off and said it's probably one of those big baboons. We laughed and walked back to the camp. The week was pretty uneventful. We saw some guys downriver fishing. Remember, that will be important. They were so far from us we didn't bother. About 5 days in, I went paddling downriver to find a good fishing site. Drifting down, I saw some hippos and some lions on the riverbank. They didn't look right though, almost like they were scared. I thought this was odd. This isn't normal behavior for them. I ended up where we saw the other camp. I paddled ashore. The guy who greeted me seemed shaken. I jokingly asked if this was their first time out here. He said yes, and they were leaving tomorrow when they get their car fixed. Something about an animal wrecking the engine. I said I'm sorry and asked him if the fish were biting here. He looked at me pale and said it's time to leave. The way he looked at me and said, "Yeah, mana isn't for everyone. You never know what's around you," just sent shivers down my spine. When I got back to the camp, I was telling my uncle what happened, and he seemed a little perplexed but tried to reassure me that, some people just aren't built for this kind of stuff. I jumped into the truck to go on a game drive, taking my friends along with me. My friend's sister is quite uptight and is scared. I'm saying don't panic. If you see one of us panic, then get scared. She laughs and we carry on. We carry on talking and she asked if it was her last night that she was dreaming or did she really see a big animal outside. I said most likely, as we are in the bush, that it was probably a big animal, but I told her not to worry as we have guns that can take down most things. Night came and we were all around the campfire telling scary stories of the bush monsters of Africa. I noticed that people downriver are running around frantically. I stop the stories and say, "Hey guys, watch closely." I looked through my scope and what I saw, however, will forever haunt me. This beast was about 3 to 4 meters tall, tearing the guy I spoke into that morning. Another beast eating what seemed to be a human torso. I put my rifle down slowly. I said calmly that we need to go. Looking at my uncle and my cousin, they saw the fear in my eyes. My uncle grabbed my rifle and looked through my scope. I heard him saying, "What in God's name?" I remember thinking these things haven't seen us. That's why we are still alive. Our friends suddenly catch on and see the fear my uncle and I are caught by. My friend's sister looks through her camera and screams. A few seconds later she says with a scrappy voice, "It's looking at us." Suddenly the fear washes over me. I turn around and see my uncle loading stuff into the truck. My cousin and friends are running around grabbing stuff. Within minutes, everything was mostly packed when we heard a branch break. The only sound we had heard. I stand dead still. Everyone else freezes on the spot, listening. The river was to our backs. I slowly gestured to everyone to get to the river, onto the canyons. The only thing I thought of what could save us were the crocs and hippos. We all slipped down the riverbank while these things were just outside of the light of the fire. All of a sudden, this thing cries out like a hippo had been eaten alive while giving birth. Going on for what seemed like forever, we managed to get into the boats and softly paddle away from the bank. What we saw standing on top of the riverbank's clear and in full view can't be described. Blood running from its mouth. My cousin shot at it. It seemed like it didn't even feel it. It stood there tall, pacing up and down the riverbank for the night. We couldn't sleep. Daybreak came and that thing walked back into the bush. The park rangers saw us on the boat and were worried that we were poachers. It was a relief to see other humans. Guns were drawn on us and we explained it all. The police said we were the only people in the park camping. We went to the other campsite and it was empty, other than those strange tracks. It's gotten me thinking, are the rangers feeding this thing? Or don't they care? Or are they covering it up? Or what's happening? I never heard anything of those other campers. One thing, I'll never go to the same part of that park. I still go to the park itself, however, I know it's watching me. And next time we meet, I'm going to try to take it home. Dead. Hey Swamp, this is a bit shorter than most stories you read, but a very interesting Skinwalker story. So, at my uncle's funeral, we were telling stories about Skinwalkers. Now keep in mind right now we are in Oklahoma, but the first part of this story took place in Arizona. So further on, we were telling stories about my mom's boyfriend. My mom's boyfriend walks up shortly after this and starts telling a story. He said one time, when he was about 17, he was partying with friends out in the middle of the desert, and then his ex-girlfriend got upset at one of his friends, so she walked about a mile down the desert road, and he felt bad, so he drove to her in his old Camaro. He hopped out and said, "Hey, you wanna just walk around for a minute, talk about it, just us?" And she says yes. So they walk around for about 5 minutes. He says, "Have you ever heard of a skinwalker?" And she says yes. And so he told her about how they are attracted to you if you talk about them, apparently. And she just laughs it off. They decide to walk back to his Camaro, when all of a sudden this funky looking man walks out of the middle of nowhere in the pitch black desert and says, "Hey, can I get a ride?" He said he'd never hopped in the car, and drove off faster than he did that day. So, that was the end of his first story. Part 2, he told us about the big black dog that used to come around and throw his Mastiff and St. Bernard around like rag dolls. And he said one day, he shot at it, and that dog never came back. The very next day we were driving in the middle of nowhere, like where houses wouldn't be for miles in Oklahoma, and all of us saw this big black dog on the side of the road staring at us. And boy, did I almost pee my pants. Thanks for sharing my story, Swamp. I appreciate ya. If any of you guys know what this could be, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening to these creepy Skinwalker and Wendigo stories. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, whether it be a Skinwalker story, a Wendigo one, or something different, please be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that help keep this show going. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new video. I upload them almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. If you're not aware, you can download your favorite Swamp Dweller scary stories on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and just about every other major podcasting platform. Thank you guys for always supporting the swamp. Without you guys, I couldn't be doing this every single day. If you're not aware, you can save about $5 right now on anything in the Swamp Dweller merch store. It's getting cold out there. I've got socks, shirts, hoodies, mugs, and just about everything else you could ever want. Some of these stories are really mysterious today. It's kind of creepy to think that you can go to a campsite for so many years and nothing happen. Then all of a sudden you go there and this creature has made it their home. And that one in Africa, really strange. What do you guys think that could be? If you made it all the way to the end, today's code word is Orange Wendigo Sauce. Comment that down below, and I will see you guys soon with another creepy video.